Today's episode is brought to you by elitefts.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help Elite FTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, Elite FTS has it.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the Elite FTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. Welcome back to Table Talk. Today, my episode is Fouad. How do you,
Abiad.
Yeah. I have this funny thing with last names on these shows, where I'll practice, and I'll even know what it is, but then I'll screw it up. So then if I do it this way, Abiad just fucked it up again. So it's the nerves, getting through the nerves. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsor. Today's sponsor is Element. Element is a sodium replacement, but a sodium drink. The biggest thing I want to say about Element is when I watched the intro of my last podcast, I screwed up the discount code because I'm so professional at what I do. And I spelled it out right, which is Drink Element, so it is Drink Element, DRINKLMNT.com, but I forgot this part, /Table Talk. So the thing with Element and why we partnered with them is it goes back to, and some of this, we'll talk about some of the sessions when you came down to train with John, was when I train, I've always had this cramping problem, and especially with the high volume stuff, and not while I'm training. Yeah. It's like you pound legs and you're just laying it up in bed watching Netflix later that day, and it's like, your adductor or your vastus medialis, or the calves are nothing compared to some of these other ones, right? And I'd be like, oh shit, no matter what I could do, I couldn't make any of that. I'm trying bananas and all this other kind of crap. And Element wasn't around back then. I don't even know if there was any of their competitors that have sugar in them now and all this other kind of crap. I couldn't figure it out. But that's always been a problem to where last summer, my tricep cramped at home, and I actually tore my tricep. This is an interesting story. It was all black and blue. I didn't have to have it repaired, but it turned all different kinds of colors. Wow. And so that I still have that problem. What I realized over the last few months is I need sodium, which with John, I remember drinking the Gatorade and all the other kind of crap, and it would help sometimes, but not really. Knock on wood, I haven't had the issue with the leg training since using Element, but it has made a difference for me. I'm not going to speak on the upper body stuff outside the tricep because normally I'm not getting cramps from training arms.
I get them from back and chest a lot. Yeah. So not as much now, but when I was more in my prime.
The lat's a good one though, because you know where I'm going with this, right? The wiping your ass.
I didn't want to say it. No, but I think it's something I definitely want to try because I had the same issue. Especially the high volume stuff. You get home and you're burnt out, and from all the sweating through the training, it's like an hour later, usually 2 hours later. The hamstring one was always the worst for me. Hamstring, adductor were always the worst for me.
Adductors was mine. It was just, then you try to, how do you stretch? I mean, you got to stand up. It's just, it's just fun to look back on. Yeah. But at the time, it's like, then at the time, you realize it's too late. You know what I'm saying? So you're trying everything to fix this. So you're eating sodium. You're doing everything that you can, and you're already behind the 8 ball on the whole thing.
For me, the worst was when it was one muscle would cramp and then the counter muscle would start to cramp. So I would get a hamstring. Then I would try to straighten out my leg and my quad would cramp. Yeah. I'm laying there. I'm yelling for my wife, get me some salt water, get me something. So now you have something for it, obviously.
Exactly. So before we get too far into this, Fouad is a retired IFBB pro. There were 15 placings, I believe. Is that right? 15 shows or 15 times you placed?
I don't actually know. It's funny. I don't actually know the amount of shows I've done. So
it's something like that.
I can't tell you exactly how many shows I've done. It was usually two shows a year on average. I turned pro in 2006. So yeah, it might be might be more than 15 pro shows. I don't know for sure, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think I did one minimum, 2 shows a year from 2006 to 2016. 2017 was my last show.
Yes.
And that was when I was done. So I probably got to be in the 15 to 20 range somewhere in there.
Then you're the owner of Hosstile Brands, which is supplement and wear.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a lot of education on the site as well. Yeah. Which, to be completely transparent, I didn't know how much education was on your site. I know what's on YouTube.
Sure.
But it's also on the site, you know, with the tons of bodybuilding stuff on there, different categories, really nicely laid out educational content. Site better than any other person in the industry that I've seen.
Thank you.
That's out there now.
Look, I think one of the things I found in when we started Hosstile was there seemed to be this apology for being a bodybuilder. I think a lot of guys were trying to pretend they weren't lovers of bodybuilding for some reason. I don't know where it came from, but people would be like, well, I don't like talking about bodybuilding that much. I like doing it, but I'm not really like a bodybuilder through and through. And I'm like, why? And I'm like, let's say you played football on the weekend with your friends. Nobody's like, I don't like talking about football. They play football on the weekend with their buddies. Then they get together on Sunday and they watch football all day long. They talk about it all week. They join fantasy clubs. They do all that kind of stuff. Bodybuilding for some reason seems to be like this. I don't know if there still is, but there was this culture where we all love to train, but let's not pretend we like it too much because then that makes us a meathead. And I'm like, no, man, I'm unapologetically a meathead. Yeah. I'm like, I love training. I love bodybuilding. I love everything about it. When there's a show on, I get excited to watch. Not just because it reminds me of doing it. I just love watching the competitions. I like talking to guys about their training. I like talking to guys about their eating. I like learning about who they are. So when we launched Hosstile, I was like, no, we are a bodybuilding company. We're not going to pretend we're a lifestyle company. We're not going to put out lifestyle clothing. We're not going to put out lifestyle products. We are a bodybuilding company first. So the goal from the start was to be bodybuilding and also be able to provide bodybuilders with everything they need. And now we're not even close to where I want to be. But the goal was always to have everything on the website, from clothing you could wear as a bodybuilder, supplements you could use as a bodybuilder, lifting gear, vitamins, minerals, the articles that they need to read, the workouts that they need to do. And we're, like I said, we're still growing. So we're far away from what the end picture looks like. But I wanted to establish us as a proudly bodybuilding company. Yes. Right. We're not shying away from it in any way. And I think a lot of companies, and I don't want to put this on anybody in particular, but I think a lot of people get into the business because they think there's a lot of money in it. And there is, depending on how you do it. And there's fast money and there's long money. And I think some people get into the business and they're like, well, where are the most amount of people? The most amount of people, even though I'm a bodybuilder, the most amount of people are in the lifestyle, right? They're not in the hardcore bodybuilding. That's more of a niche. So these hardcore bodybuilding guys are starting lifestyle companies because that's where the money is. And I'm like, you know what? I'd rather take the long road and build brand loyalty behind what I know and what I love. So we went to the bodybuilding route, and that's kind of the premise behind Hosstile and everything it's about and everything we're working towards.
And you're also the host of the Real Bodybuilding Podcast, but I want to spin back on what you were just talking about, because I live in the same niche type of area where I don't want to say it's powerlifting, even though it gets tagged as powerlifting. It's more the strength and conditioning, you know, from that realm, that side, more of I don't like the word hardcore because it's been so diluted, but more of the hardcore strength and conditioning. But the way that I've always referenced it is people who have put their strength training as one of their top 4 priorities in life, right? Yeah. That's a different level than when you drop to 5. Yeah. To 5 lifestyle, I mean, where you get top 3, you get top 2, you're talking somebody that lives for the shit. Yeah. You know, so when it's that high of a priority, it kind of excludes you from the trade brands, trade content. And so when I started the site, because you're talking about the long game, and I'm 24 years in, you know, so that was my vision. Here's the long game. I know what the short game is, you know, and I've seen a lot of people run the short game. And I just had a conversation last week with a couple of people that have been around both sides of the whole thing, and questioning, you know, was this the right move?
Okay.
You know, like, could I have done the short game, been in and out, and been financially better off, you know, as a company, or the probably company wouldn't exist. I mean, there were people that I was speaking to that played the short game.
Yeah.
And yes, they made a lot of money over the 2 or 3 year stint, and then now they're begging for $150 consultations.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
so is it the same amount over the 2 decades that they made in 4 years? Maybe, maybe not. You know, it's one of these things that I've had to come to terms with, which we were talking about a little bit beforehand, of the grass is always greener.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out how to get the fucking grass to grow.
So wait, I have a question for you though, just as somebody who's starting out.
Yeah.
If you took the fast route and you made the money, and not by selling out, let's just say you had a different model, what would you be doing? Like, isn't part of the fun of your day running your business? I'm like, and I'm only saying that as somebody new, like maybe after 20 years I would feel that way.
Yes and no, right? Because I was a trainer beforehand, so I've always been used to working 80-hour weeks, you know, so so yes, that's part of it, you know, and again, it's the grass. Like, I can sit here and say, you know, just because the last few months have been hard trying to push certain things, that, man, that'd be so nice if I didn't have to worry about these things. Yeah. But you know what? I've been doing this for almost 25 years, will be in November, 25 years now. And there's always been those things.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, so it's just in me. It's in my DNA of what it is. Yeah. You know, so from that side, yes, I would need something, because if it wasn't, say I did make first off, the odds that you're going to make that big splash and make that money is very small. Yeah. So that's a false narrative that a lot of people tell themselves. Sure. Like, they could just do that and maybe not, because even with that, look at all the people that do try to do that. True. And they all fall short. True. You know, so not everybody really does. Again, going back, I didn't know enough to be able to even try to do anything. Yeah. Because I had to learn, and still kind of learning, you know, as it goes through. So I would still be trying to find something to challenge. Yeah. You know, and frustrate me. Well,
that's kind of what I was alluding to, is I think there's, like we were talking about earlier too, there's the competition side. Yes. That's kind of built into us. Yes. So it's almost like no matter how good your business is doing, and it's not because of the money, it's not because you want more money or want more stuff. It's just like, how can I be better?
It's not there yet.
It's kind of like, most people would say to me, well, you qualified for Olympia, like, what else do you want? I'm like, okay, well, I still have so much more to go. Like, look how many guys are better than I am. So I think it's just the way we're built. It's almost like, no matter how good it is, you can still do something to make it better. So that's why I asked, like,
well, I think it's the way that we're built, but I think it's the way that we've been conditioned. Yeah. You know, so, you know, let's go back in time. Like how I got introduced to powerlifting, as we spoke about on your podcast, when I was 12, 13 years old. Yeah. How did you get introduced to just training in general?
Well, I mean, the short story is I got fat working at a pizzeria, because I was like 130 pounds in grade 10, and then all of a sudden I was 230 pounds in grade 11 because I was just eating pizza all day long. And I just got embarrassed. I was fat. I got, not fat, because I always had like wider shoulders and shit, but I got chubby. So I just started doing cardio and like circuit workouts. And I lost a bunch of weight, and I thought I looked pretty good. I was like,
at what age? Teenager?
Oh, this was, I'd probably be 17, 18 years old. Yeah. And then I went to I started bouncing actually at a club, and a couple of the guys were bodybuilders. And I mean, what I thought were really fucking big guys. So I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I like how, you know, people just get out of their way when they're walking by, and I like the look of having giant arms. But it wasn't a big deal yet. I didn't think anything of it. Went to one of their bodybuilding shows, and I was like, I think I could do that. And a buddy of mine that was there with me called me out on it. I was like, no, I don't think you can. So that was it, right? Mm-hmm. So I gave myself a year and a half. I stepped on stage in my first show at 20 and I won. And then I was like, this is pretty cool. I like the process. And I was always an introvert. I dealt with a lot of social anxiety early on. More nervousness in high school, but turned into more of a social anxiety in my 20s and into my 30s. And I found the gyms where I found my peace. It was like I was in university for the first couple of years and I just didn't feel comfortable. I didn't like going to class with 300 people. I didn't like sitting in a student center between classes. I didn't like, it just wasn't my scene. So I was actually bouncing at a strip club. So I would leave school and go to the strip club and hang out with the girls. And then I would go to the gym and be at the gym by myself or with a training partner. And those places felt calm to me. Like they always calmed me down. They felt like places where I was comfortable. So I think that's more that what made me fall in love with it than anything else, because it was somewhere where I felt normal. It was somewhere where I felt like I could just be with myself, which sounds odd, I guess, but I didn't want to just be around crowds of people. I liked being in the gym, doing my own thing. There was no social media. It wasn't about being popular. It wasn't about any of that. It was just, I found peace there.
Yeah.
So I went from there, and I when I won my first show, I was like, I think I'm going to do another one. So I did another one months later. I won that one. And then I was like, I think I got something here. So I went to the third one. I took third, qualified for the nationals all in the first year. And then the nationals I did the next year. Then it took me to make a long story short, it took me 3 nationals to finally get my pro card. But I think I went on to have a pretty good career. I don't have many regrets about my career, but I think there's some things I could have done better. More of it was mental than physical. But yeah, I got into it on a dare and I loved every minute of it. And when I look back at it, I really have no regrets, other than sometimes I think I should have finished school, but at the same time, life has turned out pretty good for me. So
yeah, I want to peel back the layers a little bit, because we're going to jump around quite a bit, back and forth, because what I find interesting in your story and talking to you out here, and when you've been out here before, is there's a lot of comparisons behind my powerlifting training, business, and life. And the reason I asked some of the questions I just asked is to see, because you just mentioned the word process, and you basically mentioned, purpose. So purpose and process is what you found when you started bodybuilding. Yeah. So it obviously we're all into this introverted sport, for a reason. You know, and the story's kind of the same. Fat kid, bullied kid, beat up kid. Finds the weight room, gets stronger, and so forth. I mean, that story. We all share the same story. But where I'm more intrigued with is we find a process. And that's what made you become a better bodybuilder, maybe become a stronger lifter, a better coach. And it's that process that I use. If it's, say, conjugated training, a lot of that's kind of how I run my business. So the process that you found through bodybuilding, as we're talking about business and stuff like that, we're probably going to uncover a lot of the same ways that you address training for a show and how you're operating your business are the same. There's probably off seasons, there's probably in seasons, there's probably times you focus more on one thing than you focus on another thing. There's all these different structures that come from there, which is intriguing to me, because I don't know if the answer is right or wrong. It's just something fun to discuss. I
think it's one of the best things I've learned from bodybuilding is that process. Because it's funny, if you talk to any of my friends, I look at everything through that lens. Everything is a 12-week prep. Because that way I don't find myself, find myself racing to get anything done. I'm like, okay, bodybuilding took this long. I guess what I'm trying to say is the biggest thing it taught me was patience. I'm like, I have to do this. I have to do it every day. This is the way it has to be done. And at the end of this amount of time will give me this result. I look at everything that way now. Everything in my life I look at through that prism of, you have to start, you have to keep working. The biggest thing I think I've taken from bodybuilding towards the rest of my life is there were days I didn't want to train. There were days I'd wake up. Those days I'd wake up and I'd be like, fuck, I don't feel like doing my cardio today. And I would be like, well, your show's 8 weeks away or whatever the fuck it is. I got to go to the gym. So I would do it anyway. And there are days I wake up and I'm like, man, I don't feel like checking my emails. It's been a struggle this month to make money. I just need a day off, but I won't take it off because I'm like, I can't take it off, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that discipline was built in through bodybuilding because I didn't have it before. In high school, if I didn't want to do something, I just wouldn't do it. I'd skip class. I think I skipped like half my last year. Mm-hmm. My last year of high school, I skipped the whole half of it. So I didn't have any of that discipline until bodybuilding taught me to go through the weeks. It's week by week. It's incremental. It's not. And I think that is what's resulting in my patience with the business, because my initial thought was what you said earlier was, I'm going to start this business. People are going to see the formulas. People are going to see the culture. It's going to take off tomorrow. And slowly I've been like, okay, we have growth, but it's going to be just like bodybuilding. Mm-hmm. It's going to be chipping away. That's the main part of the process. I think that I've taken from bodybuilding is the discipline and the patience and just kind of viewing the long game, because, everybody when they start bodybuilding wants to be huge after the first year. Well, I took this cycle, or I took this whatever, and I've been training my ass off. How come I'm not the size of that guy? And it took me a long time to realize genetics played a part, and it was going to take me a lot longer than this guy mm-hmm. to gain the size I needed. And I think for business, it's the same thing. I'm like, okay, well, I see some guys starting their businesses and they're doing really, really well. And I'm like, I'll get there. If I'm not there now, I will get there. But that all comes from bodybuilding. That thought process all comes from bodybuilding.
There's good and bad wrapped up in that, right? Mm-hmm. Because when bodybuilding was your number one priority, as when strength was my number one priority, and there's, not missing a day no matter what, yep. All this other kind of stuff, we can debate if it's necessary or not necessary. Mm-hmm. It's back then, to me, yes, it was. But the question I'm going to throw back to you is, because you worked with online prep of people before Hosstile. You still may now, but that's not your main priority. But you were doing that while you're still competing. And if you had a client, that, would you be telling them, absolutely no days off, go no matter what?
Well,
no, just would answer. Really.
No, I would never say that.
Okay, so.
But that's not a black and white question.
I know. But if with our business, though, when we get up and we have those days, and I understand what you're saying, I do it too. Yeah. And this is some of the self-reflection I have to do on myself a lot of times. Yeah. And you have those days where it's like, I still have to fucking do it. No matter what, I still have to do it. Yeah. Then you ask yourself, now wait a minute, if I was advising somebody who was in the same position, what would my advice be?
But this is different. This is different though. This is different because
is it though?
It is, because I think when we're talking about strength training, bodybuilding, whatever phrase you want to give it, your body needs a rest. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you need a rest when it comes to your business. Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to take time and, take your wife out, go to dinner.
No, I get what you're saying.
But I think, for me, I think it's important to think about your business every day. And if I was coaching somebody starting a business, I would be like, think about your business every single day.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. It's that's part of the discussions that I'll have with people when we talk about business is there's too many conversations online where people talk about business. They're not honest. Yeah. They're not fucking transparent.
So what do you mean? Well,
the first thing would be the amount of work.
Sure.
Especially if you're the owner. Yeah. The amount of work and what the work is.
Sure.
I'm sure there's always exceptions to the rule, right? And there's always the great advice that everybody always hears. But then there's the 99% of the real world, to where, yes, I still check my emails multiple times per day. Yeah. Yes, I post on my own social medias and it's fucking me. Yeah. Yes, a lot of the times I'm the one that has to do the post on the company pages. Yeah. Because there's either nobody else to do it or they're not doing it. Mm-hmm. So that's the reality, where people will sit back and they'll be like, oh man, it must be fucking nice to have somebody do this, and this. And you're like, no, motherfucker, you don't understand. I'm emptying the trash. I'm fucking putting the waste away. Yeah. It's, all these things, there still has to get done.
I think that's people's perception, which may be true, but is also dependent on the size of the company. I mean, if you're running a $100 million company, maybe you have people doing those things for you.
Yes.
But if you're running a $5, $10, $20 million company, you're probably doing a lot of that stuff yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the work ethic has to be there. I mean, as far as being dishonest and owners, you know, saying what's right and trying to portray something that's not real, I think for myself, I'll speak for myself, people know I have periods of the day that are mine. Like, I'll take my dog to the park every day. I got to take him every day. It's therapeutic for both of us.
Yeah.
At 9 o'clock at night, I shut down and me and my wife will watch TV together because me and her are working on the business all day long. So 9 o'clock at night, computers go down, we watch TV together, hang out. Sundays, a lot of times Sundays, me and my wife are at the mall or doing something together, taking a day off and just kind of, and she's usually on her phone more than I am. And I'm like, hey man, today is not the work day. Let's just shut it down. So I guess I don't want to talk outside both sides of my mouth, but every day something is being done for the business, but it's not like it's 16 hours straight every day. There are periods in the day where I have to get away from it, and then I can come back to it.
But it starts when you wake up.
Yes.
And usually it ends the last time you check email before you go to bed.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes,
That's like the reality that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, you know, all these other kind of things because yes, you bring people in to be able to take tasks and responsibilities off your plate.
Sure.
And you bring people in that can have skill sets that you don't have.
That's right.
But that's oftentimes not what's being discussed. It's like, do this, do this, do this. And then all of a sudden this whirlwind of money is going to come in.
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't, and I'm still waiting for the whirlwind of money to be able to come in.
Yeah.
You know, and trying to figure out how to balance it. And it's interesting because you're heavily in content with the podcast and stuff like that, is, you know, trying to balance the endeavors that build the business than the endeavors that are more content oriented.
Yeah.
Where that's not also what people think it is. You know, the conversion rate and ROI from the actual content piece is way smaller than people think it is.
Well, I just want to, like, so I need to explain something because I think some people, I think I've portrayed it wrong. So the podcast now serves as an advertising tool for Hosstile to some degree. I try not to talk about it too much on the podcast. You know, obviously there's a backdrop behind me. This is Hosstile and there's an intro and outro, but I try not to like sell products on the podcast. So it serves as somewhat as an advertising tool at this point, but that was never the original idea. So just between me and you talking.
Yeah.
So we spoke a lot about the ROI and all that from our podcast to our business and all that beforehand. But what I didn't express to you was when I started the podcast, it literally had nothing to do with the business, because the podcast started before the business. And I didn't start it with this genius idea that, oh, this is going to help my business when I started. I actually started just because I liked watching Joe Rogan. And I was like, there's nothing like that in bodybuilding. There was a couple of reasons. That was one, because there's nobody actually telling the guys, like the guys aren't out here telling their own story. So that was one. And the second one was there was other people had YouTube channels that were speaking for the guys. Oh, pro bodybuilders do this.
Yeah.
Pro bodybuilders do that. And it was usually astronomical amounts of gear or something stupid. So I was like, this should come from them. So I think I want to do what Rogan does. And I was terrified to do it. And a friend of mine said, look, just go buy a shitty mic, buy a shitty camera, and just start, and things will progress, which they have. So it's funny that the podcast has become synonymous with Hosstile, but that was never my intention. It just kind of happened organically. So, and now, like you said, we find ourselves having this conversation before we started about how much time does the podcast deserve versus how much time do I sit down and invest on the day-to-day in my business. I never wanted them to be connected, but now they are. So now I find myself in this place of trying to balance the two.
They always will. I mean, they are, and they're, how can I say this? They're probably not as much as you think. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I've had to be very conscious of over my time was if I felt my name was too synonymous to the brand, I disappeared from the brand. Right. So I would always have, you know, when it was authors, writers, I had content's changed too. You know, it's went from articles and blogs and forums to what we have now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the whole for 2 hours discussion there,
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. But I've always had other people, so if I felt like the number one thing I'm ever looking at with the company is what I think that valuation or what somebody would see that valuation to be, right? And then I don't want that valuation to be, well, it's devalued if you're not here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I always kind of felt like if my name is too synonymous, I have to pull back because then I'm devaluing the brand. Now, other people have told me, no, that's when you should pull throttle because you can value the brand even more. I don't know the answer to that. I just know that my path has been up and then pull back. And then so this is the crush of the ego, by the way. Every time I pulled back, sales went up.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know why either. I'm a big dick, and I heard, I don't know why, what the real reason.
Maybe when you pull back on the content, you're focusing more on the business.
Probably, because then you're focusing on the other sides, and then you figure out, where the balance is. But in full transparency, the content, I think for a lot of us is probably more fun than the other shit.
Yeah.
Because the other shit, it's weird though, right? Because the other stuff is less anxiety, actually less prep.
Yeah.
It's just like drilling down into numbers and like trying to figure out, what correlations should be, like how do you get this percentage better, and speaking to other people, and it's easy. It's not easy. Well, you get what I'm saying? It's just,
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're saying, if I'm understanding, is the content is easier to control. Like for me anyway, what I do in that day, I can see the result of it the minute it goes out. Whereas things in the business side of my life take a lot longer to come to fruition. So like if I want to come out with a new product, or I want to come out with a new flavor, I want to come out with a new shirt, it could take months depending on the product. Whereas with content, I can be like, I'm going to sit down and do a podcast, and then I'm going to put it up tomorrow, and I can immediately see if people enjoyed it or not. Or
I think that's some of it. I think the bigger thing is, just for instance, for now, I enjoy sitting down here talking to you. Yeah. Because a lot of reasons. I haven't seen you for a while. Yeah. We have caught up. There's a lot of other stuff I want to talk about.
Sure.
And it's distracting me from all the other things I know I need to be doing.
That's right.
It is you see what I'm saying? It's a very nice distraction that it's worth the extra social anxiety or preparation, all that, because I have to turn my phone off. Yeah. Nobody's going to come out here and ask me a fucking thing while I'm doing it. This is like my shelter. Yeah, yeah. And I think that when that's on air, I need one of those signs that boom, on air. Yeah, yeah. Then everybody's like, leave them the fuck alone.
That's right.
And I think I do that mentally.
Yeah, I can understand that, because like when I have a podcast, I shut my office door. Nobody calls me. Nobody knocks on my door. And you're right. That's an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is, where it's my own time, I guess. So yeah, I can see that point of it for sure. Yeah.
So when we were talking earlier beforehand, we probably need to add that on the value category. Yeah. Because we were trying to figure out what the assets and the liabilities. Yeah. I didn't really even think about that one until right now. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a pretty big asset. Yeah. Just to be able to have that time.
Yeah. No, I definitely think I definitely get value from just talking to people. Like anybody that comes on my podcast, when you came on, or any of the guys come on, it's not just the quiet time either. I actually learn quite a bit, I have coaches on, and I actually just enjoy hearing other people's stories. Like I like hearing, Branch Warren tell his backstory of growing up and having his parents divorce and having to make ends meet on his own, or Dorian Yates' story of leaving his home when he was 16, or whatever the story may be. I find it very interesting to see how everybody got to where they are at this point. So there's a bunch of different buckets it fills by doing the podcast. Something I didn't expect, to be honest with you.
What's one of the stories that resonates the most from, you just named off two real quick, but what are a couple of the big ones that are just honestly really cool to listen to?
Cedric's story, I can't remember the name of it, so I'm going to butcher this. Yeah. My memory is really bad, but Cedric was part of a group in military that would go out in Iraq and help the other group that was out first. If they had something break down with one of their vehicles or something like that, he was part of a group that would go out and help the other group get set back up and back on their way. And he told a story on the podcast about going out and being in the middle of a gunfight. And I'm like, this is Cedric. This is the guy like I stood at a booth with for hours on end, and we just signed autographs. And he's telling me about this gunfight in the middle of the desert. I'm like, it's just interesting to see, because you don't think of these people in this light. Like, I knew he was a sergeant or a staff sergeant. I knew he was in the military, but we didn't really talk about it. So having him on the podcast and telling me these stories, I'm like, this is wild. Or having him tell me the story about building his own gym equipment. You know, they wouldn't bring gym equipment for the soldiers. So Cedric literally built the equipment out of wood. And he showed me pictures of like a Smith machine and a shoulder press, and like, this is insane to me. So stuff like that. I mean, stuff like Kamal was recently on and telling me about winning the worlds 13 times in a row, and how life was in the Middle East as a competitor and how much they got paid, and these kind of things. These things are fascinating to me, because I'm like, I don't know, I guess you could say I'm sheltered. I didn't really, I just kept to myself. I did my own thing. I thought everybody just bodybuilded the way I did. And when I hear these stories, I'm like, or when I hear Branch Warren's story, I'm like, man, this guy came from nothing. Like, dad left him. Mom didn't make a lot of money. I think he said they were living in their car at one point. And now look at him. And you're like, fuck, people complain about a lot of shit they have no reason to complain for, right? Like, it almost feels like the more people I interview, the people that complain the most are the people who've had the most. And the people who've had less are the ones that are just thankful. So, I don't know, there's a lot to gain. I found something in the podcast that I didn't expect, which was there was a lot to gain from just talking to other people.
Well, I think those stories are huge, because your time in the sport, the magazines were still a thing, and you kind of saw them filter out. So you're kind of bridged that gap, right? Where the way bodybuilding used to be is the magazines controlled the narrative. You know, so while my stint in competing in bodybuilding was very short, I've always followed, the sport. Wasn't my biggest passion as strength as otherwise, but I followed it. And you read Flex and you watch these magazines, like, man, these guys are rolling, man. Here's the closet, here's the car, here's all this other stuff. And that was the story the magazine editors were putting out for people to see. Where the internet changed that in a good way, because now you see the real story. Well, kind of, right? You see more of their real story through their own Instagram, their own highlight reels, sometimes the low light, but not so much. Where through a longer form podcast, if you're talking to these guys, you're doing what you actually just said, is most of us live in a bubble, right? And we don't understand that. We all know we have our own history and our own background, but we always seem to forget, so does everybody else.
That's right.
Because we only see what the magazines are putting, or what's on whatever they're putting on social, until you talk to them. Then you're like, holy shit. We got way more in common than I thought we did. Because even people in all these industries, the top 4%, or the top people who put training as a top 4 priority. In all those industries, you can have people that completely don't like each other, but they're still going to agree on 90% of the things once they sit down and talk. Right? It's just that same background, but you don't see that. And you don't hear their stories a lot. Where when you can provide that opportunity for that to be seen, then other people who are in their bubble can hear it and think, maybe I'm not alone.
Well, listen, it's really, really enlightening to me. So it's kind of works on both sides. So in my own case, talking about anxiety, I talked about it plenty on my podcast, and inevitably I get a number of DMs afterwards from younger kids who are like, I had no idea other people felt the way I felt. So I think there's a lot of value in just people knowing that Cedric used to talk about his own anxiety. I've talked about my anxiety. Ian has talked about his anxiety or depression. I think this makes people feel normal. They're like, oh, fuck, these guys don't have it all figured out. They're just like I am. So that's one thing. The other thing is, it's everybody thinks their struggle is the biggest struggle.
Well, it's the hardest struggle they've ever had.
That's right. So I'm like, oh, I had anxiety in my 20s. My life was so horrible, and I had to deal with all these things that nobody knows about. So I struggled. And then you sit down with Branch Warren, and you're like, oh, I didn't really struggle. My struggle was not as big a struggle as I made it out to be. Or you sit down with any number of people I've talked to, and you're like, wow, you know what? Or you think to yourself, I work really hard. And then you sit down with Cedric and you realize he sleeps standing up because he's working all the time, and he's got 4 kids, and he still manages to make it to the Olympia stage. And you're like, wait a minute. Yeah, I'm working hard, but this is another level, right? So I think the main value in talking to people is not just learning. It makes you self-aware that you're not the be-all end-all, or your life is not as grand or important or difficult or whatever word you want to put on it as you might think it is, because now you've talked to 100 people with different experiences that could be just like yours or harder than yours or easier than yours, but at least you have some perspective on life. I never had that perspective on life because I was so introverted that I didn't talk to nobody. So I thought, well, it's me and my buddies and we're all the same, so I must have it just as hard as everybody else. As soon as you step outside your bubble, you're like, wait a minute, fuck. My life is great. Or this guy understands me. Or, so I think
it's perspective.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the drive.
Yeah.
That's always in there.
I just mean, I guess the point I'm coming from is people online, the things I see them write sometimes are very absolute. Like, nobody knows my struggle, or nobody knows how I feel, or I'm like, yeah, motherfucker, somebody does. Yeah, somebody knows how you feel, and somebody's probably had it 10 times worse. And I think the problem is people just don't talk to other people. They just assume that their shit's the worst, or their shit's the best, or whatever it is, without actually knowing anybody else to discuss with and actually figure out how other people think and feel. And I think that, to me, is the most unintended joy or unintended positive that comes from my podcast, is just seeing other people's lives, told to me. And I'm like, I never thought that would be a thing for me. I wanted to talk to people. I wanted to expose them to the masses, but I never thought it would benefit me as much as it has.
Yes. Well, I can see that, but with, say, the anxiety and the depression, so you go back to when you're competing, you still, have the depression, you still have the anxiety, most of us do, but you still have to get your fucking training in, you still have to get your meals in, you still got to get all these other things in, so while you have to contend with it and deal with it, you still have to do what you have to fucking do, to be able to get ready, right? And that becomes something that benefits you now in business, because I don't want to sit here and say you don't have time to deal with your anxiety, or you don't have time to deal with your depression.
Sure.
Because you should, and you do, but you still have your work to fucking do.
That's right.
Which has to get done, right? And this isn't trying to downgrade or belittle anybody. I think a lot of people will like to use it as an excuse to not get things done. Yes. And I'm just being fucking honest here. And if I get ripped apart, I get ripped apart. Yeah. I'm not saying everybody, right? That's never the case, but I would like to see somebody prove to me that nobody is doing what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can tell you I've done it.
Yeah.
So I remember having a job interview. I think it was a security company, and it was pretty good pay, and I didn't have a job at the time. And I was like, okay, I got an interview, and somehow, and this has happened multiple times, but this is one that sticks out in my mind. Somehow I convinced myself I didn't have to go. I don't remember what it was. I don't remember if I had to be home with my mom, or I don't remember what the reason I gave myself was, but it sticks out in my mind because I remember thinking in the days after that, you totally flaked on that appointment. Your anxiety got the best of you. You convinced yourself, because that's what people with anxiety do. They convince themselves to stay away from whatever it is they're scared of. You convinced yourself not to go to the interview. And now you need the job and you can't have it because you just literally didn't show up to the interview. They're never going to fucking have you back there. So like you're saying,
so then you're depressed.
So that, well, it's not just that, it's just, this guilt sinks in because you're like, to me, I always looked at it like I let my anxiety win. To me, it's a game. I play this game in my mind where it's me against my anxiety. And I used to not be able to stand in line at a grocery store. I would like, if I went to a grocery store line and there was 6 people in line and 3 behind me, my anxiety might have got so bad that I had to leave the line. I might leave the line, I might take a lap around the store and might come back. So I just think of all the times where I let it, like I succumbed to it, right? And I'd be like, so I played this game with myself. In that instance, I remember waking up the day after going, you totally fucking lost. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not going to do that again. I have to fight this thing. There were dinners I went to with my wife where I would sit down at dinner and be like, I don't feel right. And she'd be like, do you want to leave? Because she knows all about it, right? She'd be like, do you want to leave? I'm like, no, we're going to stick it. And I would start to sweat. Like for me, the way you could see it was usually sweating. She'd be like, you look like you're not doing too good. And I'd be like, we're going to fucking sit here. Even if my shirt is soaked, we're going to sit here. And I eventually ended up doing those kind of things to try to get through it. But going like...
So leaning into it.
Leaning into it. But going,
which is where you learned in the weight room, right?
Well...
I mean, resistance. How do you get stronger? How do you get bigger?
That's right. That's kind of how the game went in my mind. I'm like, okay, to me, it was a fight. To me, I was fighting somebody. Like, me and you were going to fucking fight. And every time I walk away from this fight, you won. And I just played a game. I kept a scoreboard in my mind. And that's how I got past it. And I think with anxiety, the key to it is the more times you can do the thing that you're scared of, the less the anxiety grows. So I just kept playing this game in my mind until I could finally get through it. Now, steroids doesn't make it any better. Yeah. Anybody who has anxiety who also does steroids knows it's going to amplify the fuck out of it, just like all your other feelings. So it's definitely gotten even better since I've retired, because now I'm not taking gear. But going back to what you were saying, in the gym is the only place I didn't have anxiety.
How did you not, or did you, I should, instead of assuming, when you competed? How's that not?
See, that's what I think I said earlier. I'm not sure if I said one of my regrets was more mental than physical. That's where it hurt me the most. And God bless him, John was the only one that was able to calm me down. Yeah. I remember Hani, when I worked with Hani Rambod, he actually said to Paul, I think it was the day before the Arnolds, he was like, man, is he like this all the time? And Paul was like, yeah, before shows, this is what he's like. And the only person that could really connect with it on was Cedric, because Cedric used to get really anxious before shows. And that's the only time my anxiety peaked, which was obviously the worst time for it to peak because you're going on stage. Yeah. And then it led to things like self-sabotage. I would overeat. I'd be like, oh, I need to be more full, but really I was just giving myself an excuse to look like shit. So there was some regrettable times in my career, but only mentally, not physically, or not like as a matter of working hard or anything like that. It was more, I wish I was able to get control of my mind. And the reason John helped me is because John was such a calm person that, and I believed in him so much that when he told me something, I was able to relax and just be like, he's got it. And it also was probably maybe some maturity too, because by the time I had started working with John, I was like 34 years old. Yeah. So it was maybe a combination of both. But I don't remember a coach having that effect on me before John. So it didn't manifest itself in the gym. It didn't manifest itself, dieting or making food or anything like that. But it did start to manifest itself as I got 4, 3, 2, 1 week out, 3 days out, day before the show in the hotel room. Holy fuck, the show's tomorrow. So and I was never able to quell that mental fear, I guess you want to call it. And I think that was the detriment. When I look back at my photos and I look back at my career, me and my wife have talked about it, and this could be my own theory or whatever, but I think I could have been a much better bodybuilder had I been able to control my mind, which is why I say to people now, just because you see somebody with a good physique, it doesn't mean they're going to be able to control the pressure that comes with bodybuilding.
Well, that's still hormonal issues that are happening because of the anxiety, which is increasing the cortisol. All those other things can wash you out real quick.
Yeah.
Which sucks.
Yeah.
Because fuck, you're there.
See, that's what Cedric used to say. See, I never had that issue as much.
Yeah.
Like I was able to, when I didn't self-sabotage, I would always come in shape. I could get shredded. Cedric used to say that to me because Cedric's anxiety, I think, for the stage was worse than mine. Mm-hmm. And he would always say to me, man, he's like, I get there and I look good. And he's like 2 days before. And then I start thinking about the show. And then I don't know if I start to hold water. And I think his was a cortisol issue. Mm-hmm. So for me, it never ruined my look. As long as I stuck to what I was doing, I thought I looked good. I can't explain it. I wasn't able to perform properly. I was just a nervous wreck. I wasn't able to just be a bodybuilder and be happy and be content. And I think when you're content, you're better, right? When you're constantly picking at yourself and telling yourself you're doing something wrong, I don't think you can perform as well as if you're happy with what you're doing. And I think that's also why I had a really good year with Hani one year for that reason. I was checking all the boxes. Mm-hmm. And I was doing really well, and my contentment in my own effort was there. And then I had the same kind of effect with John. And when I was like 34, 35, that's when I won a couple shows because I was able to settle into what I was doing and be happy about it. And I think that goes a long way. Like I think as an athlete or anybody who has to perform under pressure, I think when the pressure gets too great for you, it's going to hinder your performance.
How did you meet John? I wanted to get into that because that's how I met you, was from John.
I don't remember where we met the first time. I honestly have such a bad memory, Dave. I'm sorry, man. It's like, I think we met, I think I just messaged him because I think the first video I saw of John was the cattle prod video. And I think more and more people were talking about him. And I think I'd read a couple articles on T-Nation. And then I think I just reached out to him and asked him if he would train me. And I just wanted a training program. And he gave me a training program. And I started from there. And I think the first time I met him is he asked me to come up and train. Mm-hmm. So I drove down. Here. We worked out at Metro Fitness. Mm-hmm. Is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I worked out at Metro Fitness and put me through kind of a hard workout. But I think because I sweat so much, I think he thought it was harder than it was. So the next time I came back, he really kicked my ass. But yeah, I think the first time we met in person was that training session at Metro Fitness. When I think of John, I think I wish I would have gotten a lot closer to him than I did. But I think that's my own anxiety. But I knew right away he was an awesome dude. I knew right away when I met him he was an awesome dude. He took the time to just answer any questions that I had, and he really seemed like he cared from like day one. So I think we started working on just training stuff, and Dennis James was coaching me on nutrition. And then after the Dallas Europa 2014, it went fine. Like my prep was good, but I just felt like I was gravitating towards John more. So I asked John if he would take over everything, and I told Dennis, and then I moved away from working with Dennis, and John had taken over my entire program after that. And then it was just smooth sailing. Like everything he did, my workouts felt better, my eating felt better, his demeanor made me feel better mentally. It just seemed like a perfect fit because my own mental struggles and the way he acted made it fit together well. And yeah, John taught me so much without teaching me anything, like not on purpose. Do you know what I mean? Like just being around him, just talking to him. But my only regret is not coming down here more. And part of that was because of COVID, but I wish I had come down more to train with him. Mm-hmm.
What were some of the things that you said that he taught you without teaching you?
Ugh. Dude, John will forever be my biggest teacher, more than my dad. more than my oldest brother is like a father figure to me because he's like 13 years older than I am. John taught me the most important lesson in life, and that is it's okay to say you don't know and still be the smartest guy in the room. So basically, I would say humility. Watching John talk to people and me knowing that he knows 100 times more than them, but talk to people and accept all of their ideas and theories and everything with no ego, that was new to me. Because before John, I was the guy with the ego. Oh, I know everything. Nobody can tell me anything. I've done this for 15 years. I fucking got it all figured out. And then watching John, I'm like, well, fuck, man, that's the right way to be. And literally just, I would ask him stuff. And, you know, he's my coach. He's supposed to know everything. He'd be like, I don't know. He'd literally say to me, I'd be like, hey, this literature says this. He's like, look, sometimes the literature and the reality don't match. He's like, I can't tell you why this works better, but this thing, I've tried it. It works better than what you read in that book or whatever it is, right? So, but the fact that he could say, I don't know, and the fact that he would listen to anybody, whether they're a first-year coach or a 10-year coach, and take their ideas or take my ideas, knowing that he knew as much as he did, was all humility and lack of ego, which was a huge lesson for me. And I think it's made me better at the podcast than I ever would have been had I not known John, because I think one of the things that I get right in the podcast that other podcasts don't necessarily get right is I'm not the center of attention. I don't have to be the know-it-all. When people come on my podcast, I shine a light on them and let them be the know-it-all and let them be the ones that teach me something. Had I not met John, I couldn't fucking do that. I would be the guy sitting there wanting to say, oh, I know what I'm talking, or I'd be debating with the person instead of just letting them give me their ideas. So that was obviously unintentional. He didn't know he was doing it, but I would just watch and listen. And it's been invaluable to me. And it's all from him.
If that's the biggest thing, what would be the second thing underneath that?
I think just being kind, honestly, is maybe that's not an important enough lesson for some people, but I think for me it was, because I didn't realize the power of being nice. And I still don't have it perfected. I'm still kind of a dick, unfortunately. And sometimes I come off like a dick because of my anxiety. So sometimes I'm quiet and people take that as the wrong way. But John, just the being genuine, not just nice, but being genuinely nice was, look, I think on our podcast, me and you talked about your funeral and the people around the casket. Yeah. Okay. I guess the only way I can relate this to John is not one person said a fucking bad thing about John when he was gone. Not one. I never read one. Even the biggest asshole people on YouTube didn't make negative videos. And to me, that is somebody who's just genuinely nice and didn't really have it out for anybody. And that's something I'm not doing a good job of, that I'm trying to learn by still thinking about him that way. Because I'm like, that's the right way to be. Because if you go, and I probably think about death a lot more than I want to now, because I've had so many people pass in the last couple of years that are close to me. But when I go, I don't think it'll be like that, but that's what I would like it to be like. Right? And so I think humility first, being genuine second, and have a thirst for knowledge. I don't have John's thirst for knowledge. You know, like talking about coaching his kids in football. The guy's studying football plays as if he's in the NFL.
I know.
Come on, man, you're coaching 10-year-olds. Like, but that's a thirst for knowledge that I just don't have that. I like the things I like, and I don't care about anything else. Whereas John seems like he just has that thirst for knowledge. So there's a lot of things, man, that he never ever tried to instill in me that I just learned from just watching him.
What were some of the things training-wise that you adjusted after starting to work with it? Because he's a higher volume guy.
John was the best.
So did you ever do the lower volume, higher intensity work?
I never did the like one set to failure kind of thing. I never did that. I was always a higher volume trainer. So I think we fit that way, but more so he taught me the powerlifting stuff that I never knew. So like including bands in my workouts, including chains in my workouts, teaching me that I don't have to go to failure on every set. So much. My training so in 2011, I had like a breakout year where I beat Dennis Wolf at one of these shows, and I was like, people were like, this kid's coming up, right? I don't know if I got into the hype too much, but I started to like push myself harder because I wanted to be better than third. I'm like, I could have beat the other two guys. So I started to push myself harder, and I drove my body into the ground in 12 and 13. And when John got a hold of me, my body just turned around, because there is a point where you can push too hard. And I was breaking down my body and not recovering. And I call it chronic overtraining. You can chronically overtrain and not know you're doing it. You can just be one of these insane guys that has to go to the gym all the time, goes to failure on every set, takes a caffeine pill or stimulant or some sort, and just gets it done. That was me. And I think I broke my body down to the point where John got a hold of me. He's like, just pull back. Just slow down. We're going to start using some bands so you don't have to go as heavy. We're going to start going to failure on your last set, not all your sets. We're going to start training 6 days a week, but 2 of the days are going to be pump workouts instead of all-out workouts all the time. Just these small changes, immediately, my body just turned right around. 2015, I think, was the biggest I ever was. And my training felt better. Like my knee issues were better. My elbow issues were better. Because I wasn't torturing my joints, or like my tricep tendons and my bicep tendons felt better, because he's like, you don't have to go that heavy for arms. You can use moderate weight and just use more reps and more focus. So all of these things tied together freshened up my physique. I got a lot bigger, a lot fuller, rounder, and I won my first IFBB show in 2015, and I give that all credit to John.
That's funny that you say that, because I remember you coming down, and it was a back workout, and it was seal ride. I don't know what we were doing, right? But 2 things I remember from you is your rear delts, right, looked like biceps, and I'm like, John, he's using too much rear delts on it. You're rowing. He's like, too much rear delt on this, or teres. Too much teres on this. Instead of rowing. Then I looked at him like, and why the fuck's he using so much weight? And I remember John he pulled back. I'm working on it, man. I'm working on it. Because you're strong as fuck, but I'm looking at this, I'm like, the wrong shit's being activated. He's using too much of this other thing. It's heavy as fuck. And I'm still kind of trying to figure this stuff out. With John, it's like, is this really necessary? Because in training there's necessary, specific, all these variables. And he's like, for him right now, yes. He says, but I'm working. You know how he was really. We're working on it. We're working slowly on it. And then for you to bring that up, as one of the main things, is a testament to his coaching ability. Because that couldn't have been easy for you.
No.
Because now he's telling you to use less weight.
It was all learning curve. Actually, he had to adjust his program to me, because he would tell me to train 6 days a week, but 2 of them had to be pump days. And inevitably, my pump days would always turn into full workouts. So he's like, look, just go 5 days a week. He's like, it's not working. You're not going easy enough on the easy days. Just go 5 days a week, take 2 days off. So we had to pull 1 day out. But it's funny you said that about my teres, because I tore my teres doing T-bar rows a couple years after that. And it was probably because I was using too much teres in the lift.
He was working on it.
He didn't work on it fast enough.
He was working on it. Anything nutritionally or diet-wise that you changed with him?
John taught me not to be insane about my food. So he basically taught me if it fits your macros, but only with these select foods that we like. So, most people do if it fits your macros, and they're like, well, I can fit a Big Mac in and just not eat for the rest of the day, right? No, John would be like, look, these are your proteins, these are your carbs, right? You can switch egg whites for chicken. You can switch turkey for chicken. You can switch fish for chicken. You can, your ground beef, I don't care if you have flank or ground beef, as long as it's the same lean. You can switch oatmeal for cream or rice. You can switch potato for sweet potato. I don't care if it's got a little bit more fiber, it doesn't matter. Like, John was able to take out, some of these guys online. I'm not going to name any names because I actually don't know anybody off the top of my head, but some people I've seen online are very like, my diet's the best. This is what you have to do. This is what you have to eat. It has to be this way. And if it's not, you're doing it wrong. And I was one of those people, not that that's how I coach people, but I thought that's what I had to do. I would wake up and I was like, I had to have oatmeal. Why do I have to have oatmeal? Because everybody else has oatmeal. Bodybuilding's an oatmeal. Oatmeal is a bodybuilding food. So I had to have oatmeal. I had to have it, whey with it. I'd have a whey and oatmeal for breakfast. I just had very select foods, and other foods were bad, or other foods at certain times were bad. You're not supposed to have a sweet potato pre-workout because it's slow digesting. Now I still believe that. It doesn't mean you can't do it, right? But I had very strict rules about where food was supposed to be and food timing. I have to have 6 meals a day. John kind of erased all that. He's like, look, yes, certain carbs are better at certain times, but it's not the end of the world. If you want to have a sweet potato before you work out, just make sure there's enough time for you to digest it. It's not the end of the world if you want to wake up and have cream of rice instead of oatmeal in the morning. Or if you want to have a couple slices of sourdough bread, you're still going to get what you need to get. That was huge for me because all of a sudden it opened up all this freedom, right? Like, oh, you don't have to have rice. You can have pasta. You can have a lot less because it's more calorie dense, but you can have pasta. Oh, I can have pasta. I didn't know that. So all of a sudden I had more flexibility in my diet, more freedom in my diet, because he would just say, look, these are your foods. You put them in here where you see fit. Before you go to bed, if you want to have a shake because you don't feel like eating, go ahead, have whey. If you feel hungry and you want to have like egg whites, have some egg whites. So that opened up a lot of doors to me. Then there was a timing thing where I was like, well, you got to eat every 2 hours. You got to get 6 meals a day. That's the only way to go. And John was like, no, it's all right if you go 2.5 hours. It's okay if you go 3 hours. He's like, and if you can't get 6 meals a day in, we'll do 5. We'll just make them a little bit bigger. All of this was new to me, which sounds really stupid because I had been bodybuilding for like 12 or 13 years at that point. But I just always had a very rigid mind because I didn't know enough, right? Like, I didn't know that the carbs were all going to work the same way pretty much, or that the proteins were still going to build the muscle. You know what I mean? Like, I just had very set ways of doing things. So John kind of opened up my mind. And that goes again with the humility comment, right? Because seeing him have an open mind to people that he was probably way smarter than about nutrition or whatever allowed me to open up my mind to see other ways.
And probably to absorb what he was saying.
Well, yeah, because I trusted him. And I tell people this too, and most people are probably going to take this the wrong way, but I tell people if you have a coach and you want to be successful, you got to put him on a pedestal. Because if you have your coach on a pedestal, that means you're going to believe anything he fucking tells you, and you're going to do it exactly the way he tells you to do it. And I had John on a pedestal. I was like, this guy fucking knows everything, and you do whatever he says. And I remember even the week before my first win, he goes, you're ready. You're just going to walk on stage. I go, what are you talking about, man? I go, I haven't carb loaded. I haven't done anything. He's like, no, don't worry about it. He's like, we're going to put 50 grams of carbs in a day starting Monday. I'm like, John, I'm only eating 150 grams of carbs. I'm like, that's going to leave me at like 350 by Friday. I'm like, there's not going to be enough carb. I'm 260 pounds on stage. It's not going to fill me out. He's like, don't worry. Just trust me. So I get off the phone with him. I run to my wife right away because I'm like, he's going to fuck this up. I go, Summer, I'm like, he says he's not going to carb load me. I'm worried. Like, I'm not going to be full. I'm going to look like shit on stage. She goes, call him back, talk to him. So I did. Call him back. I'm like, John, I'm freaking out, man. You got to tell me what's going on. And he's like, just trust me. Just wait till Tuesday or Wednesday and we'll have another conversation. So I did. And it was weird. My body was so sensitive at that point that just the extra 50 grams on Monday, I woke up Tuesday looking totally different. And then another 50 on Tuesday. So I made 100 on Tuesday. I woke up on Wednesday looking like I was going to win. I'm like, hey, it's all good, man. Just do what you got to do. Right. Like, so, but that was because I put him on such a pedestal that no matter what he told me, even if I questioned it, I would do it. So, I think that's really valuable for people, because what I see a lot of times now is people hiring coaches and then questioning them. Oh, why are we doing this? And why are we doing that? And not questioning like they want to learn, but questioning like they have a better way. Well, Johnny over here said that they're doing it this way, and Mark over here said that they're doing it that way. And I'm like, why do you have a coach?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're just going to have all these other theories, why even bother? My philosophy was always, I'm going to give him 100%. And if I look like shit at the end, then it's his fault. But if I'm asking 10 other people and then I don't listen to them, then it's my fault. So I always just said I might as well do it 100%. And with John, it worked out.
I think it would, where I pause on that is it would depend on the coach.
Mm-hmm.
Where, I mean, there's some coaches telling people to do some stupid shit.
Okay.
They do probably need to be questioned. Or the, the athlete needs to be not ignorant
Mm-hmm.
and be able to ask more educated questions.
Sure.
Especially when we're talking about drugs and stuff like that.
Well, I think it depends on the coach, right? Like, if I'm hiring John, I know I'm hiring an elite coach,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's people in the industry know there's a set of elite coaches,
Mm-hmm.
and I could probably name them all right now. There's like probably 7 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
If I hire one of those people, I don't need to question them,
Yes.
right? You have your own. Like, look, when I started with John, he said, I want you to use some insulin. And I said, John, I've had my experiences with insulin. I'm not a big fan. And he goes, okay, don't worry about it. I just won't use it. So you have to have your own boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only willing to do this much test. I'm not willing to do any orals. I don't want to do any fucking insulin. I don't have the money for GH, whatever your boundaries
Mm-hmm.
are. I'm not saying don't have your own boundaries, but I'm saying if you've hired an elite coach, then you have to trust them.
Yeah.
If you hire Johnny from fucking the gym next door, then yeah, I mean, that's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I should parse that out by saying, like, when you're talking about the top coaches in the world, you have to just be all in with them,
Mm-hmm.
right?
With the anabolic, not just the PEDs, just drugs aside, with and it's, I'm not that close to the bodybuilding world, but close enough. There was a lot of deaths, right?
Yeah.
And it seems to have subsided some. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I don't think we've had, like, I don't know when the last one was recently. To my knowledge, I mean, look, this happens in the amateur ranks all the time, so I'm sure, I don't want to insult anybody. I'm sure somebody has passed that I don't know about, but the last most popular one I know is Cedric.
Yeah.
When that was not that long ago. I mean, was it 6 months? Not even 6 months ago?
Now they're all, obviously these are all individual cases. You know,
Yes.
they're all different variances. But there's been a lot of discussion,
Mm-hmm.
you know, on reasons why. And it's, as I sit back and I listen to the different discussions, I'm kind of like, well, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to throw some of them out and kind of ask what your opinion is.
Sure.
Again, this is no one person in particular.
Sure.
There's always variables.
Yep.
You know, there's always those people who are going to pass no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And who's to say that it's even drug related?
Sure.
So I'm, you know, prefacing all those things.
Yeah.
Where some of the things that I heard were, I mean, I'll just throw them out, then we can talk afterwards. That COVID disrupted everything. So a lot of prep times just kept extending. So instead of where they might lower the stuff, they don't. And it's just, oh shit, now this show got moved from this date to this date to this date. So it made basically a pre-contest way longer than normal. The counter to that was they never reduced the shit anyhow. You know, so it kind of debated that or threw that out. The other one that I've heard was because now people are more educated on how to mitigate side effects. Yeah. So say when I was competing, if I got purple, you know, it's, the first thing is I thought it was a good thing. Yeah. Which now you realize it's not, but I thought it was a good thing. But had I known I could have just taken some light blood pressure meds, would I have lowered my dose or taken more? Yeah, I see. I would have taken more. Yeah. So now when you can mitigate with metformin, blood pressure, all these different things, does that increase the dose to a point to where it's toxic? Yeah. You know, that would be the other. The third is just poor coaching. So
I'll try and touch on them before I forget the first one. So the first one was COVID and extending prep times. Now, the people I do know that passed didn't have any of that in their plans anyways. So that would just be void right away because they weren't prepping. And when they did find out their show was canceled, they just stopped prepping. So And plus, even if it wasn't, I don't think extending a cycle 4 weeks is going to do that kind of damage if the damage wasn't already there. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like an extra 4 weeks on a cycle is going to, you know what I'm saying? So I don't think that's really a great one. The second one was mitigating side effects. I think that one's true, but not for the sense that you're saying it. I think this is something I said on my podcast, and it got some hate and some people. Okay, so I'm going to preface the whole thing with this. Anytime you take steroids, you're fucking with you're risking your health.
Yeah.
Immediately, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There are ways to maybe try and do it a little bit healthier so that's not as damaging, but no matter what you do, it's going to be damaging. So I want to start the conversation there so that nobody says Fouad's trying to say it's healthy. I'm not trying to say it's healthy. It's definitely not healthy. You're definitely taking some portion of your life in your own hands.
Well, fuck, I'll come out and say it. I mean, if we're talking just a general person that's got a low testosterone of 50, and they're not, having somebody help them with hormone optimization, not taking steroids and cycles and shit like that, then they are probably more unhealthy than they are healthy if their hormones are optimized. Especially when you look at the leading causes of death. But we're not talking about those people. So continue.
So what I would say is the size of the guys, I think, is part of the problem. Now, a lot of people are like, no, that's not it. That's not it. I could be wrong. But I think guys are competing longer into their lives, and they have to be bigger than they used to be. So, Cedric's 280 pounds and he's 40 something years old. I don't know how much bodybuilding is conducive to being 40, blasting that much gear and being that weight. Like, part of the reason I'm downsizing is because I turn 44 next month. And I'm like, you can't be 44 years old and walking around 290 fucking pounds. That's not a good recipe, right? So I think that was I think one of the main things is the age which guys are competing into. Guys competing into their 40s regularly now, like Sean Roden was 44, I believe, when he passed. These guys are just getting older and they're still cranking the gear pretty hard, and I think that's too much on the body to handle. And I think because of the way competing is now, maybe less guys are going off, so they're doing more drugs, and then they're bridging, and the bridging is still kind of a cycle. They're not really going off. They're not giving their body a time to recover. They're not giving their body to come down in size. They're always walking around at 280, 290, 300 pounds. These things are all like a bad recipe, right? Like, if you look at bodybuilding previously, guys would finish, they'd take some time off, they would lower their drugs, they would go up and down with their cycles. I feel like that's changed a little bit. Guys are on all the time. They're either on less or more, but they're on all the time. And then competing into your late 30s or 40s, you can't. I just don't think you can be this weight walking around like that. So that's more what I would say. And yes, I do think, I don't want to say taking blood pressure medication is a great idea.
Oh, yes.
But it's not an excuse to blast more gear.
Yes.
I don't think anybody's doing that. I don't think any of the guys are saying, well, my blood pressure's good, so I can still blast a lot of gear, right? I think guys are more apt to get their blood work done and see my kidney levels are off, my liver levels are off, my diabetes are off, my cholesterol's off, and they might lower their dose and try and bring their stuff back to normal. I don't think just the blood pressure. I don't think anybody's sitting there going, well, my blood pressure's good, everything else is fucked up, but my blood pressure's good, so I'll just keep going.
Yeah. Because
all these other things are also markers that most of the guys are looking at. One of the other things that could be an issue is guys are getting paid more. So guys are getting paid more because of YouTube. Guys are getting paid more because of Instagram, through their supplement contracts and things like that. And I think more guys are looking at having to be in shape more often. So if you have to be in shape more often, that means maybe you're on more than you want to be. You're not able to let your body rest and downsize because it's not going to look great on Instagram or on YouTube or whatever. So this is another reason. I mean, look, A lot of people would say that it has nothing to do with any of that, and it has to do with what we just went through for 2 years. So
I think it's I think it's all of it. I mean, it's interesting that the social media aspect, because take social media away, just the bodybuilding days, all the photos were done pre and post show.
That's right.
And then you don't know what the guys look like.
That's right.
The rest of the year.
So the pressure for the bodybuilder himself is far less then, because nowadays Nick Walker can't look fat. Nick Walker can't look small. So we're talking about the best bodybuilder on earth that people are watching every single day. He's posting on his Instagram every single day. He's coming out with 2 YouTube videos a week. How can you take a break? Where is he going to take a break? So that's got to be part of it too.
Is there somebody in his camp? You know, is there somebody in his ear? You know, because I mean, this can't be a good thing.
No. It's, well, look, I don't want to use Nick as an example only. It's all of the guys. Anybody who's on social media, any professional bodybuilder who is trying to make his way is on YouTube, and they're on Instagram, and they're trying to make a living, and they're trying to get their brand out there. This is part of their life. I can't think of one popular bodybuilder who I've seen out of shape or small in the last 5 years, except for Sean. And that's the funny part, because Sean Roden used to actually go off and take time off for, months at a time. And he wouldn't even look like a bodybuilder. Then all of a sudden he'd show up at the Olympia and win the Olympia. So it's like, I can't say it's the answer.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it can't be fucking helpful.
Yeah.
When these guys are under a microscope all the time.
I think the mitigation's a good thing. And I think that's something that's just recently, over the past 5 years, became more a part of the conversation.
Yes.
And, companies like Marek Health are huge in helping with this.
Yeah.
Link is in the description. But there's other doctors are coming slowly coming around, to be able to listen and to be able to help. And they still have a long way to go.
Sure.
The companies like Marek are leading the way, right? Because the more that they can lead the way, the more I think the local doctors or, just normal people.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can I ask you, what exactly does Marek do for me? Like, if I'm a bodybuilder and I need help, can I email them?
They'll run your labs,
So they'll run all my labs.
Yeah, so you already would know. So you already know what you need. So you would just get a hold of them and then tell them whatever labs that you need. They'll run the labs same way anybody else would. And then if that's all you want, it's just the labs and then a report.
Yeah.
They'll send you the labs and the report. You'll go to your local whatever lab center.
Laboratory. Is there somebody there though that will read my labs with me, or they don't? They do that too?
Yeah. So they have both options. So they have the self-service thing to where you just have the labs done. They send you the report, everything you need to know there. The other is there's a care provider that will be appointed. This is probably the better way to do it.
Yeah.
Is to sign up and then you have a care provider appointed to you. This provider is not a doctor or a practitioner in any way. They are your middleman, more or less. And then with speaking with them, they know hormone optimization across the board, all of it, from peptides, all of it, to supplements as well.
Is it a drastic difference in price between option A and option B?
Yes.
Okay, what's the price to have somebody watch over me?
A few $100s more.
Oh, that's not bad.
But it's more than just that, because you'll have that conversation with that practitioner, determine what your needs are. Now, keep in mind, this practitioner is not a doctor, so they don't have to live by the doctor rules, right? Sure. So you can say, look, I'm blasting the hell out of shit, which this is not their primary business, by the way. Most of it's just the hormone optimization of the people that are way too low.
Yeah.
And then he's going to say, okay, this is a mitigation that we need to work with.
But do they understand bodybuilding numbers? Like, would they say, like, okay, this guy's running some of this, some of this, some of that?
To the highest level.
Okay, so this is huge, because on my podcast we talk about getting blood work done all the time. So kids now, it's working, because like you said, it's become a major part of the conversation. I don't know how much we've helped. All I know is I get a ton of DMs from kids who are like, my doctor gave me a requisition, I got my blood work done, but he's freaking out. And they'll tell me like a number, and I'll be like, he's freaking out because he doesn't understand what you're doing. I'm not saying he's wrong, but you need to have somebody look at it that understands what you're trying to do.
Yes.
So this will give people a chance to have
that conversation. Then they have all that's done, all the testing's done, your goals are established with whatever this. Then the next step is you will speak to the doctor or practitioner, somebody that can write the prescriptions.
Sure.
To either mitigate or to prescribe.
Sure.
And if, let's say somebody's just taking, I'm not speaking for what they would actually do because I don't know the individual case and all that.
Yeah.
But say somebody's taking a bunch of bunk shit and their numbers are high. A lot of people are like, well, they would never write something for me because my numbers are too high.
Yeah.
Well, they might because your shit's probably fake and it's contaminated and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So they'll write what they legally can write.
That's
They can't go through the roof.
Yeah.
But more importantly, they're looking at all the variables to say, look, your blood pressure is fucked. Here's this prescription, or you should take this because of the liver enzymes, or all the different markers that are in there to be able to balance and optimize. One of the things that I discovered over the last 15 years, just generally, not competitively, but just generally, is I would blast and dust the same way I always kind of did.
Yeah.
And figuring out optimizing shit, in the right area is way better.
Yeah.
As far as training goes and all this other stuff goes, and it's not what you think it is.
I know.
It's like we come from this school of thought of, okay, well, you need to have this balance of, all these different things, and they synergistically work all together.
Mm-hmm.
And then all this other shit falls apart, where sometimes it's, hey, if you just get the blood pressure under fucking control, then you can recover.
Yeah.
And then you make way better gains. Or your sleeping sucks.
Yeah.
And this will help with the sleeping. So it's kind of it has just the test option, where before I would just, because I still have Eric Serrano as my doctor, so I still have that. So I would typically, what I've done over the past 20 years is, and it's been easier the last 10 because I could order my labs myself.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I go in to see the doctor, it's like, here's my labs.
Yeah.
Completely opposite than what normally happens.
Yeah.
Normally you go into the doctor, they're like, I want to take your labs. They take your labs and they call you and he's yelling at you, this is fucked up. They're like, well, I want to see all of it. I want to talk about all of it here.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. But they don't know because it's after the fact because you already saw them.
That's right.
So I was proactive. Like, I want to get my work because then I want to go see him. And what I've done with Marek is get my work, get their recommendations, see what they say. Then I'm going to go see the guy that's known me and been, under him for 25 years and see what the difference is.
Sure.
And pretty much right on point, you know, so that impressed the shit out of me there, where it's needed.
Yeah. Well, listen,
time.
Honestly, just having a place for a lot of these younger kids, maybe they don't live in a big city. Maybe they're too shy. It's a family doctor. They don't want their family doctor to talk to their mother. Whatever the case may be, for whatever reason, maybe there's a multitude of reasons why they're not getting blood work done, or they're getting it done but they don't understand it, or nobody's helping them understand it. This is very, very helpful to those kids, because I get these DMs all the time. Where can I get my blood work done? Who can I talk to? Who can help me with it? And they'll message me and I won't do it because I'm like, look, man, I'm not a doctor.
You can't.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to give you the wrong advice. You got to talk to your doctor about it, and then they can't. So this is it's a good service.
It's frustrating.
Yeah.
It's getting better.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go back, think of the number of times, and this is the conversation I've always had. Think of the number of times just when you were competing that you had to go see the doctor for anything. A bee sting. Well, your bee sting was because you're taking steroids. It didn't matter what you walked in there for. You know?
I've gotten turned away actually a bunch of times.
Oh, really?
Well, because I wouldn't go to for a long time. I didn't go to my family doctor. I just went to different clinics whenever I needed something. I had a shoulder infection once from a shot, and I went in to see the doctor, and they're like, "Sorry, we can't help you." And I'm like, "You motherfuckers! If I was a heroin addict, you would fucking help me. But because I did a shot of testosterone, you're not going to help me." So I had to go to a different clinic, get a doctor to give me antibiotics to get rid of the infection. So, yeah, I know how hard it was, man. I've had pharmacies turn me away if I was trying to buy syringes. It's just everything you name. I've had doctors not want to help me. Like, I walked into a clinic and be like, "I can't help you, sorry." I'm like, "You haven't seen me yet. I could have a cold." They're like, "Sorry, I can't help you."
You could have cancer.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the part that always scared me.
I tore my tricep benching, my elbow basically exploded and the tricep tendon flew off, obviously. I go to see the doctor. He's a family friend, apparently. I go to see him like a couple days after it happened. I get a fucking 20-minute lecture about steroids. You know, if you weren't on steroids, your bones would have been stronger and you would have been able to handle this. And I was like, if I wasn't on steroids, I would have been benching 400 pounds. So what are we talking about? Like, I don't need your fucking lecture. Like, I'm sitting here in pain. My fucking tricep is black and blue. It's torn off the bone. My elbow is shattered. And you think this is the time for you to explain to me that I shouldn't be on steroids? I'm 40 years old. I've been bodybuilding for 20 years. And now you're trying to fucking fix, like, just do your fucking job, man. So anyway, if there's people out there that are willing to help, I'm sure there's a ton of people that could use it.
Yeah. How did you tear the tricep?
Benching. I was on the bench press, flat bench, and I came down. Listen, I've had problems with this elbow for years. And every time I would dumbbell press or bench, it would just get inflamed like crazy. And the pain would be like not tolerable. And one day I was benching. I think I only had 3 plates on the bar. And I came down, I just felt it pop. And I got it, like with my partner, we got it back up, which always frustrates me. I'm like, how could I get this up so quickly after I tore my tricep? I'm like, I couldn't do it when I was fine.
Yeah.
But now the fear has kicked in and I got the thing bar off my chest. But yeah, I went and got, they did, was it x-rays? Oh, no. He just felt it. He's like, I can't feel your tricep tendon. He just put his finger, he's like, we got to get surgery. So I went in for surgery, and then after the surgery, he told me, he's like, I had to pick bone fragments out of your entire tendon because he's like, your elbow basically just shattered. So they repaired it. I worked out the right side of my body for like 8 weeks while the left side healed. And then I just got back to work slowly, but I was kind of that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. Like when I tore my tricep, I knew I kind of was never going to get on stage again because he didn't repair it properly. So this arm is like an inch or two smaller than this arm. And I can't bench properly. Like if I try and barbell bench, there's nothing. And if I try and dumbbell press, I'm almost using my shoulder more than my arm. So it was kind of like, even though I didn't admit it at the time, I think after I tore my tricep, I was kind of like, fuck, this is just not going to work because I just couldn't train the way I wanted to train.
Before that, what was one of the biggest setbacks that you could pick up?
I've had a ton of injuries. So I tore my hamstring off the bone. You know, your hamstring has 3 different hamstrings, I guess you call them. The furthest one out to the left, to the outside of my left leg, I tore that a week before my first show. I discovered anadrol, and I was stiff leg deadlifting 405 a week out from a show.
Yeah, this is all real good.
But it felt really light. So I was like, so I tore that off the bone, but it actually helped me in my career because my hamstrings looked all fucked up. So they looked fucked up in a good way. Anyway, I tore the middle one like 15 years later. That disappeared. Then I tore my teres off the bone on the right side doing really heavy T-bars. I'm pretty sure I've torn both biceps, but they're probably minor tears. And I tore this tricep off the bone. I tore this hamstring, but it's in the middle of I tore my right hamstring too, but it's in the middle of the belly of the muscle, but you can see it kind of balled up. So yeah, I've dealt with a lot of tendon pain in my elbows.
How did you train around or through those at the time?
I just didn't do the stuff that really so skull crushers were the worst. With a cambered bar, just like laying, traditional skull crushers. I just did everything, but my arms didn't suffer for it too much. Like I was still able to build up to 23 inches. But it was just, I was never able to do the stuff I wanted to do. So I had a lot of cable work, a lot of 2-arm overhead dumbbell, a lot of that kind of shit. When it came to my back, I had PRP shots done. I've had smaller tears with PRP shots done that have helped, but the tricep is the only one I got surgery on. The other injuries were all PRP healed, and I got back in the gym and back to work. I had hernia surgery Also, that kind of fucked up my abs. So it's just little things, man. It's just, all these little things start to add up, and then you can't train the way you want to train. And if you can't train the way you want to train, they don't look the way you want to look. And so one thing led to another, and I was like, okay, I gotta get out.
What advice or what have you learned from, because getting injured sucks, right? There's the physical issue, which is actually the easier part.
Yeah.
The mental part is, there's that.
Yeah.
So how did you wrap your head around that to keep? Yeah, obviously you're going to still do what you have to do, right? But you're also questioning: are you going to be able to be ready for the show? Are you going to be able to do this and all that? How did you wrap your head around that? And what do you recommend to people that are in that same situation?
So there was one show I pulled out of because I was like, I don't want to go in there half-assed because I'm injured. That was the second hamstring tear. The next time I tore my quad, and I did the Arnold's anyway. And it was my biggest regret because the 2017 Arnold was probably I hate that look almost more than any other bodybuilding show I've ever done. And it's because my stomach was bloated and my legs were downsized because I tore my quad about 3 weeks from the show and I couldn't train legs. So my legs kind of deflated, but my stomach was also bloated. So my whole physique looked like shit. So what I would advise is this: if you have an injury that's not going to allow you to train properly, skip the show. I know that goes against all the hardcore fucking, I don't care. If you can't look your best on stage, there's no pride in getting on and looking like shit or not being as best as you can be, because there's another show down the road that you can do where you probably can be your best. So save it for that show. So that's number one. Number two, if you tear something before a show, but you can still train, then do the show, right? If you can still train the body part somehow to keep it full, then go ahead and do the show. If you tear a body part in the off season, just fucking work around it and don't stop. So if I tore like I said, when I tore my left tricep, I had it in a sling and they had it all wrapped up. And I still have photos of me in the gym doing bench press with my right arm. Just, because the one, they say it helps the other side heal faster if there's more blood flow or blood circulation. So I just trained, I did all the same stuff, because the biggest thing I found with depression, like we talked about earlier, is doing something. Don't just sit. So I thought, well, what do I do every day? When I go to the gym, I go to the grocery store, I go do cardio. That's my day. I'm a professional bodybuilder. So now I can't because this arm's torn. So all I have is legs. What am I going to do? Just go do legs? What am I going to do for the other 5 days, 6 days? So I thought, I'm going to keep the exact same schedule. I'm going to do back, chest, shoulders, whatever, right? So I would go in and do back, and I would just do all my rows with one arm, the pull downs with one arm. And I just kept going to the gym. It made me feel better mentally because I had a sense of normalcy. I was still going to the gym every day, still saying hi to people at the gym. It's slowly getting better. And then the cast came off, and I started to train and all that. So I think having a sense of normalcy after a tear that's debilitating is the most important thing. Having a tear that is not debilitating in any way, just don't do the fucking movements that affect it. So like when I tore my teres, I had PRP done, and I did any movements that didn't affect. I did all the movements that didn't affect my teres. So anything, a lot of tricep stuff actually has teres involved. So I avoided a lot of tricep movements. Obviously, I avoided all my back movements, and I just did everything else. So that's that. Now, if you talk about why is it happening, I haven't answered that yet. My knee-jerk reaction is train slower, train with more control, and handle weight that you can handle. And those go all in conjunction, right? Because if you're handling weight that you can handle, it's probably going to be slower and it's probably going to be in control. If you're jerking weight around or you're dropping your negatives really fast, you're probably handling a weight that, well, either you're lifting like shit or you're handling a weight that you can't handle properly. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is make sure your electrolytes are in balance. Because I remember 2 of my tears came from being the day after a cheat meal. And my cheat meals, for people who know, are pretty big. So the day after binging, you're retaining a ton of water, your muscles are all tight because they're all swollen. tear. That's how I tore my quad before the Arnold's. It was a cheat meal the night before. I'd eaten a ton of food. Next day I went in and had a crazy quad pump. I went to do walking lunges and I tore my quad at the top because the stretch was too much. So I would say make sure your electrolytes in balance. That means after traveling too. A lot of people get overly hydrated or dehydrated from traveling. And being able to control the weight. Those are the two biggest things I can think of.
When you were coming into the sport, going back to when you just started, did you have the naysayers or the people that are saying, look, what are you going to do with this weightlifting crap? Why do you keep doing that? And was it, it's kind of part of all of our story, but how prevalent was that through, and did it ever stop when you were competing?
Well, it did stop after I proved myself, like after I turned pro and I, cracked the top 5 in my first show and qualified for the Arnold's, and I got on a couple covers of magazines. People were like, oh fuck, he's really actually doing the shit. But it took like 10 years for that to happen. The naysayers didn't bother me at all. They actually poured more fuel on the fire because Toronto, most people know where Toronto is, but it's like one of the biggest cities in Canada, if not the biggest city in Canada. I'm from Windsor, like 3 hours from there. So people from Toronto at the time were always like, who's this guy from Windsor? He's not going to be shit. And that actually gave me fuel. And I was like, okay, we'll see. Right. But that was positive. Mm-hmm. On a more negative front, my parents were always very supportive of everything. So they were like, you do what makes you happy as long as you do it 1,000%. But they also didn't know about steroids and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. But my brother did. So when I told my brother after my first show, or it might have been after my second show, I said, I think I'm going to keep doing it. No, I think it was even longer. I think it was 24. So it might have been like 3 or 4 years in. I was actually working for him at the time in sales. And I said, I think I'm going to keep doing this thing. I think I want to be a pro bodybuilder. And he tried his hardest to he's like, we had a long talk. He's like, you're not going to make any money. He's like, you're probably not going to make it that far. He's like, there's not that many people that make it in bodybuilding. And if you do, not a lot of people make money, and there's your health, and you're going to have to take steroids. And what about all these other things? And, what about you're going to lose your hair? And he went all the way down the list. I was like, this is my fucking older brother, man. He's like, why don't you just stay the size you are now? I was like 220 at the time, I think. And I was doing like a lot of photo shoots and shit at the time because I was like a smaller bodybuilder. So I was like, let's just keep doing what you're doing now and just do photo shoots. It's like, I have no fucking desire to be a model. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I want to fucking be huge. So I don't give a shit about the photos. So he was totally against it. We didn't even talk for like a year, or we didn't talk. It was after that, a week after that, he's like, tried something else. He's like, listen, I can't have you going into meetings at 290 pounds with like GM executives and shit. He's like, you're going to have to make a decision. Do you want to keep this job or do you want to bodybuild? And the job was very lucrative for me at the time, being 24 years old or 23 years old. I had a company car, company phone, company computer, company gas card. I'm like, plus I was making like 60 grand a year. And I'm like, as a 23-year-old, I'm like, this is great, right? I was like, oh, I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go bodybuild. He's like, you're going to quit this job to go lift weights. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I'm out. And I left. I didn't even bat an eye at it. I actually quit like 3 or 4 jobs that were very well paid jobs because they weren't conducive to bodybuilding. One was a night shift at a factory. I think I was making like $30 an hour at that time, which was huge. And I was like, I can't fucking sleep, man. I get home at 8 in the morning. I can't sleep. My appetite is shit when I wake up. I'm like, my workouts suck. So after like a month, I'm like, I quit. They're like, you're going to quit this job. You know how hard it is for people to get this job? I'm like, can't work out. Sorry. So I fucking left. Yeah. So the funny thing is, fast forward 7 years to the Flex Pro, my brother is in the audience cheering me on. Mm-hmm. And now, fast forward even further, and my brother is my partner in my business. Yeah. That was totally against it. So I guess the moral of the story is if you have a passion for something, you got to do whatever the fuck it takes to get there and ignore whoever it is along the way.
The reason I like to ask that question is many of us all share the stories of that. And part of the narrative that we hear growing up is, you know, look, man, in your final days, this is the last thing you're going to be thinking about. You're going to be thinking about X, Y, Z, all this other kind of stuff. And, you know, I've had a couple times in my life where I thought, you know, that in the hospital, it wasn't going to turn out the way I thought it was going to turn out.
Yeah.
And, you know, what I was thinking about were some of the training, you know, some of the training sessions, you know, that there's some markers that I'm going to think about to the day I die.
Yeah.
Right now, yes, I'm thinking about my kids, right? There's more room to think about things than what people make it out to be. If you were, you know, had a week left and you knew and you couldn't do anything, we just had to sit there and think back.
Yeah.
What would be some of those things that would come to the front of highlights of being in the gym, or, you know, shows that you won, or things through bodybuilding and training that they're going to be with you until you die?
This is going to sound so vain.
It's all right.
And it's not, honestly, it's not it's probably not it's the first thing I thought of in my head, but it's probably not the best memory. So the first thing I thought of was, at no other point in my life am I going to have an audience full of people cheering for me. That is gone. It's just gone. It's never going to happen again. I remember, so my first show I did was all my family. That's not a big deal. It's your family and friends. They're going to cheer for you, right? But I remember doing a guest appearance in the Caribbean, and I remember doing a guest appearance in Michigan. And these two guest appearances, the fucking entire crowd was standing, cheering, as if I was like Ronnie Coleman. And I couldn't believe, I'm like, why are these people going so crazy? I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss, you know, one of the things was I always had some pretty good back poses. So I remember it became a kind of thing in my head. I would pose from the front, nobody would cheer, be quiet. Not that they were bad shots, but just when I turned around and did my back shots, inevitably, every time I did a back double bicep, I would get cheers from the crowd. And I was like, when I retired, I thought to myself, there's no other place on earth that's going to happen for me. So I'm like, so that, as vain as it sounds, was a thing, like, and I didn't even bodybuild for the stage, but for some reason that stands out as just, you know, one of those things you can say. It's kind of like saying, I'm never going to squat 5 plates again. I never was a heavy squatter. 5 plates was usually the most I ever did for any amount of reps. But it was a sad day when I was like, I'm never going to squat 5 plates again. I'm like, I might be able to if I really work up to it, but it's probably never going to happen again. I might even squat 4 plates anymore. So those things kind of stand out to me first. But as far as like positive experiences, first time I got a magazine cover was a really big deal, because back in the day, they weren't just bought for you. You actually had to like earn them.
How did that come about?
It was a last minute thing. They had a model. I forget what bodybuilder they had set up, but it fell through. He couldn't make it. So Robert Kennedy called me and he's like, can you come down for a photo shoot? And I'm like, well, yeah, like, you're fucking Robert Kennedy. So I got my car, drove down to Toronto, I did a photo shoot. I thought it was just for a feature article, which I think is what it was supposed to be like. And then they liked a couple of the shots so well, they're like, we're going to put this one on the cover. I'm like, you're fucking shitting me. They're like, no, this is going to be the cover for, I forget what month it was. And that was, so they put it on the cover, and then we had a couple friends of mine threw me a cover launch party. They just did they had a party for me at one of these bars with all my covers there and shit. And that was pretty cool. So,
is that where you first saw it?
Yeah, well, no, I had seen digital copies of it first, and they photoshopped my shoulder a bit so it looked a little thicker. Yeah. They photoshopped my chest a little bit so it looked a little thicker. I was like, it was interesting because it was my first. When I got signed on by Muscle Tech, it was my first experience with a real company. I had been on with one company before that, but I don't want to say a real company, but like a big company. It was my first experience with a big company. It was my first experience at like a real photo shoot with real photographers and lights and like just an entirely different way of operating. It was my first experience with magazines and seeing what they do to doctor photos and make them look a certain way, and how the process works of getting the cover and putting the colors out and everything that they do. So all of that was very fascinating to me, because before that, all I knew was train, get on stage. I didn't know the other side of the sport, which was the business side of it. So all that kind of stands out. I think For me, when I think training wise, it's weird. I don't have any grandiose training memories except for training with my current training partner, Paul, who I've been training with for 20 years. It's some nasty fucking leg workouts. I can remember him throwing up. I can remember almost wanting to throw up. Some of those workouts, like we used to do railroads. I don't know if you know what railroads are.
What's a railroad?
Railroad is when you get on a leg press, you do 1 plate for 10, 2 plates for 20, 3 plates for 30, 4 plates for 40, all the way up to 10 plates for 100.
All it's straight.
No. Do 10 for 10.
And just throw the weight on right on top.
Do 1 plate for 10 reps.
Yes.
Take a rest.
Got it.
Let him do
Yeah.
it. Then you do your next set. Then you do the next set. The most I've ever gotten is 80. Because it's fucking death. Like when you're doing 8 plates for 80 after doing all the other ones first, you don't just feel your quads burning. Now your hamstrings are burning, your calves are burning, your glutes are burning. Like everything is just destroyed. So some of those workouts, because then we would do that and then we would finish the workout. We'd go do hack squats, squats, leg extensions. And some of those workouts, man, I know people always think like, well, did you get to train at this gym? Did you get to train with that guy? And those things are cool because like it's an experience of training with somebody. Like when the first time I came to Elite FTS, I thought it was so cool. I was like, man, I'm here with Tate and John's here and we're like killing a fucking leg workout. This is amazing. But they're not the most grueling workouts in my opinion, because I think the most grueling workouts happen when no one's watching and you're just there with your buddy that you always train with and you're trying to kill each other. So I have to say, even though I've been able to train with a lot of cool people and been in a lot of cool gyms, my favorite training sessions are just the ones where we fucking didn't turn a camera on. We're wearing shitty clothes and we just try to bury each other for an hour straight. So, I mean, it's a little anticlimactic probably for a podcast. I apologize, but
not really, because that's the truth.
That's the truth. Yeah.
You know, it really is. There's some of the ones I think back on myself are ones that was just me.
Yeah.
And I was just pissed for whatever reason, and I needed that training session. And what I did was stupid, right? Yeah. And probably not the most productive. Yeah. But I'll never forget those.
Yeah. I actually just remembered one when you said that of being by myself. Probably about 3 years ago. I forget what I was mad about. I don't know if I got in a fight with my wife or whatever the fuck it was. I used to go to this little hole in the wall gym, and there's usually 2 or 3 people in there, but this day it was a Saturday morning, nobody was there. And they let me kind of put the music on myself. I put the music on, I started training legs, and I just blacked out. Like I just zoned right out. I was like, I didn't do any insane weight or anything, but I remember the workout being one of the most grueling workouts I've ever had as far as like rep counts, the amount of weight I was using for those rep counts, and just not stopping. I think I did like 6 or 7 different exercises. It was one of those training sessions where I was happy nobody was there. I didn't want to talk to nobody. I was actually happy to have a training partner that day. So, but those are the ones that are never captured on camera. They're never like, they're not super exciting to hear about because it's not like, because people think when you get together with another pro, you're going to have this explosion of like crazy training.
Usually not, because you're talking too much.
That's right. It's usually like you're catching up or you're trying to feel each other out, and it's not, the synergy is not there, because the synergy is going to be there more with the guy you train with every day. So going to train with another pro is fun because you get to hang out, but it's not going to be the best workout ever. You know, I mean, some of the probably one of the most fun workouts were with John. And one time I came down here with Dorian Hamilton, and we crushed legs, and he just did not leave me alone that day. Instead of doing 20s on the leg press, we were doing 30s. He was, I always loved coming down here to train with John. Those will forever be highlights for sure.
What things are you working on right now? Where on your Instagram just the other day, you were asking people about oversized T-shirts. So because you got an apparel line as well. Yeah. So what are some of the projects that you're currently working on that aren't like under wraps and secret and shit like that?
Well, honestly, I try and run the business in a way that nothing's under wraps, even though my wife hates me for it, because she's like, stop telling everybody what we're doing. But I feel like there's and this might be wrong. I think other people in business might say this is wrong, but I like to bring people along for the ride. Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm testing out this shirt. We're testing out some custom ideas. I'm testing out this flavor. What do you guys think of this? What do you guys think of that? I kind of like feeling like our business is like a community business where everybody like comes along and says, now that shirt sucks, or that flavor sucks. Or so I did that. So we're actually working on an entirely new custom line. So right now our shirts are not all custom and our hoodies are not all custom. And we're working on getting an entirely new custom line put out. We already did with our tank tops, which were a fucking huge hit. So for anybody listening, thank you guys for that day. But they went over really, really well. So now the next phase is pants, because I currently hate our joggers that we have. So pants, jerseys, more 3/4 sleeve. And then we have, that's the fall line. And we have the winter stuff coming out. So we're going to have some thicker hoodies. We're going to have some crew necks, some toques and beanies. And then on the supplement side, it's going to be tough and tight timing wise, but I'm working on a vitamin mineral all-in-one and some fish oil. Now, when I say vitamin mineral, don't get me wrong. It's not just like a regular vitamin mineral. It's going to be vitamin mineral wellness. So it'll be a number of different ingredients all in this product that you can kind of take once a day or twice a day, depending on how hard you train. And with that, we're going to probably release a fish oil. So there's some of that coming down the line too. It just might be 3 or 4 months, because this is just how things work in the supplement world. I'm sure you know that.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I was going to say with the projects that you're working on, as far as what you put out there, it depends what the lead time is.
That's right.
You know, it's, if somebody can see what you're doing and get it done before you can,
then
you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But anybody else, they still got to catch up.
Yeah.
You know, so by the time you put out that first oversized custom tee, well, that could be 3 months just to get it to there.
See, for me, I think of it a little differently. It's like everybody has oversized tees, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has 3/4 sleeves. Everybody has t-shirts. I just think ours are better.
Mm-hmm.
So not that everybody, but like my goal with the custom stuff is, let's do something people aren't doing, right? So like when you see the shirt I'm wearing, you see a stock shirt with a print in the center. Mm-hmm. When we do custom work, I can print anywhere on the shirt. I can print all the way down the sleeve. I can print in the seam. I can print all the way across the shirt, kind of like we do with the tank tops. So I feel like the custom option gives us a way to just be a level up from just a supplement brand clothing. Because most supplement brand clothing is just shirt, supplement logo, we're done. And I don't want that. It's just like our supplements. We put 100% into our supplements, makes them premium, makes them a little bit more expensive, but you get what you pay for. And the same goes for our clothing. With the cut and sew and custom work, we can make our clothing a level up from just a logo supplement shirt and be done with it.
And what's the best way for people to find you? As far as it's easy to find you, right? So what's the best aggregate way to find you? Like if they want to know what's really going on, would it be their Instagram or would it be the podcast?
Well, the best way to know what's going on and find out details is for the company is just the hosstile.com or Hosstile Subs Instagram. If you find out what's going on with me, which is if you go to Fouad Abiad, if you go to @Fouad Abiad on Instagram, I'm usually talking about everything, whether it be the podcast, the company, my own personal stuff. So if you want to get an idea of what's going on everywhere, like what's new in the podcast or what's new in the company, you can just follow me on Instagram. That's probably the best way to do it.
All right. I want to thank you for coming out.
Yeah.
As I've been joking since we've been starting this, I still don't know how to close the podcast, so I just say we're done.
Well, listen, before we go off, I just want to say thank you very much for having me on, Dave. I've always had massive amount of respect for you and what you've created here, so I really appreciate you having me on.
No, thank you. I'm glad you came down.
Thank you.